You're in a forest 40,000 years ago. You're running. A boar you were driving toward the rest of your group turned on you instead. It caught you in the thigh with one tusk. You feel the heat before you feel the pain. Then the pain hits. You look down, and the wound is deep, muscle exposed, blood coming fast. You're 2 hours from camp. The nearest thing to a hospital is a woman in your group who knows which plants grow near the river. And if she can't fix this, you don't survive the week. Ancient humans lived inside an almost constant threat of physical injury. This is not a rare scenario. This was Tuesday. The predators alone were enough. Cave lions, saber-tooths, direwolves. You couldn't avoid getting hurt. The only question was, what happened after? And here's what's strange. We assumed for a long time that the answer was basically nothing. That ancient humans got hurt and died. That medicine was a modern invention. Something that started with the Greeks, or maybe the Egyptians. That our ancestors were too primitive to understand what was happening inside their own bodies. The evidence says something completely different. In 2023, researchers in Borneo found a skeleton dating back at least 31,000 years. The individual had their left lower leg amputated, not torn off by an animal, not crushed in a rockfall, surgically amputated. The bone had been cut cleanly, and then it healed. The person lived for years after the procedure. Years. They walked on a stump. Someone cut through living bone with a stone tool, controlled the bleeding, kept the wound clean long enough for it not to kill the person, and that person survived. This is the oldest known surgery in the human record, and it was already sophisticated. So how did they do it? Start with the wound itself. When you get a deep cut today, the first thing a doctor does is clean it. Ancient humans figured this out without germ theory, without knowing what bacteria was. They just knew that certain wounds rotted and certain wounds healed, and they started paying attention to the difference. They noticed that wounds packed with specific plants healed cleaner. They noticed that some wounds turned black and killed people within days, and others didn't. They experimented across generations and kept what worked. Yarrow was one of the first, Achilla millefolium. Its common name is soldier's woundwort. It grows across Europe, Asia, and North America. When you pack yarrow into a wound, it slows bleeding. The plant contains compounds that actually promote clotting. Neanderthals, not modern humans, Neanderthals, left evidence of using yarrow. In Shanidar Cave in Iraq, researchers found pollen deposits from yarrow and other medicinal plants buried with a Neanderthal skeleton 60,000 years ago. These weren't food plants. They were plants we still use in herbal medicine today. Either Neanderthals discovered their properties independently, or the knowledge is even older than we thought and passed between species. Honey came next. Raw honey in a wound sounds like something your grandmother made up, but it works. Honey is hygroscopic, meaning it pulls moisture out of bacteria and kills them. It also produces small amounts of hydrogen peroxide as it breaks down. Ancient humans in multiple separate regions figured this out. Egyptian medical texts from 2600 BC describe honey as a wound treatment, but the practice goes back much further, found in African rock art and oral traditions that predate writing by tens of thousands of years. Maggots. When a wound became infected and tissue started dying, certain ancient cultures placed specific fly larvae directly into the wound. This sounds wrong. It is the opposite of wrong. Maggots eat only dead tissue. They leave living tissue completely alone. They also secrete compounds that kill bacteria and stimulate healing. You can still get maggot therapy prescribed by a doctor in the United States today for wounds that won't close. Ancient humans figured this out by watching wounds in the wild and deciding that sometimes what looked disgusting was actually working. But tools and plants only solve part of the problem. A deep wound in the thigh can kill you from blood loss in minutes. You need pressure, and you need someone applying it. You need hands. When someone went down, stopping was not a question. Everyone knew everyone. Ancient human groups were small. 30 to 50 people was a typical band. This is where the community piece becomes impossible to separate from the medicine. A wounded hunter meant a smaller group the next day. A dead hunter meant fewer people to watch for predators at night. Fewer people to gather food. Fewer hands for the children. Keeping injured members alive was biological self-interest, dressed up as compassion. The Shanidar Neanderthal I mentioned earlier, the one with the healed broken arm and severe arthritis who lived to 40, he couldn't have functioned as a productive hunter for years before he died. His group fed him, protected him, and kept him going. That's real. That's 60,000 years ago, and it wasn't unique to him. Across dozens of ancient skeletal sites, researchers keep finding the same thing, healed injuries that should have been fatal without sustained care. A pelvis broken in 3 places, healed. A skull fracture, healed. A compound fracture of the forearm where both bones snapped clean, healed perfectly straight. which means someone set it. Setting a broken bone means you understand that the pieces need to be aligned. You understand that if they heal crooked, the person will never use that limb properly again. You understand the future consequence of what you do right now. That's not instinct, that's medical reasoning, and some of what they did was surgical. There's a practice called trepanation, a hole drilled into the skull deliberately while the patient is alive. It sounds like a nightmare. Researchers have found trepaned skulls going back 10,000 years on every inhabited continent, and in many of them, the bone around the hole shows regrowth, meaning the patients survive for months or years after the procedure. Researchers believe it was used to relieve pressure after head trauma. If someone took a blow to the skull and started seizing or behaving strangely, drilling a hole in the skull to release built-up blood or fluid could actually save them. And it did, repeatedly, on multiple continents. The person performing that procedure didn't have a medical degree. They had tens of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, passed down through observation and teaching, refined generation by generation. They had good hands, and a steady nerve, and a group of people holding the patient still. There was also pain management. Ancient humans chewed willow bark. Willow bark contains salicin, which your body converts to salicylate acid, the active compound in aspirin. They used it for pain and fever. Evidence of this goes back at least 10,000 years, and possibly much further. Poppies were cultivated in the Mediterranean for their sedative properties from at least 5000 BC, and possibly used long before cultivation. Some researchers believe early humans found fermented fruit and understood intoxication's numbing properties well before they understood why it worked. What built this knowledge is the piece that gets overlooked. It wasn't one genius who figured it out. It was thousands of people, over hundreds of thousands of years, paying close attention to what happened when they tried something, and then telling the next generation. An elder watching a younger person dress a wound and saying, "Not that plant, this one." A mother teaching her daughter which leaves reduce swelling. A hunter watching which wounds killed and which didn't, and drawing the right conclusion. The medicine was real, the mechanism that produced it was memory, language, and the choice to care. For 300,000 years, every single time a human survived a wound that should have killed them, it was because someone else helped them through it. There was no other option. You couldn't go home and recover alone. You couldn't order medication. You needed people who knew things and were willing to stay. Every doctor alive today is the end of a chain that starts in a cave 60,000 years ago, with someone packing yarrow into a wound and deciding to see what happened next.